Welcome to the Dr. Broadway Podcast, the musical theater history podcast where a couple of doctors sit around and talk about Broadway. I am your co-host, Dr. Kristin Stultz Pressley, joined as always by Dr. Tracey Brent-Chessum. Tracey, tell us where we're going today.
Oh, another Jukebox musical. This is actually what the end of our Turn Up the Jukebox micromester. We're moving on to some different things in our next episode here, but this one we get to talk about I think it's a pretty fun musical. It's fun to listen to, that's for sure. It's amazing. It has its complications, but we're discussing MJ the musical, which premieres on Broadway in 2022 and features the iconic music of Michael Jackson. And I don't know about you, Kristin, but I mean, we grew up in that era, and I wasn't allowed to listen to him until I was like much older, like in high school. And then I went back and was like, oh, I got to catch up on all the 80s and stuff.
It's so good.
You know, what was it? The Dangerous album was about the time my parents were like, okay, we can't stop you. We can't stop you from listening to this other music yet. So right. that's the one, and that's the time where, I really developed an appreciation for Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
So.
Well, funnily enough, I grew up exactly the same time you did. And we, Michael Jackson, of course, he was an icon. We saw the commercials. We had I didn't have, but we knew the pants and the red leather jacket and all
sparkly
the iconic,
shoes.
The glove, the moonwalk, all that stuff. You could not grow up in the 80s without being surrounded by it. But I didn't really listen to his music either. It's not so much that I wasn't allowed. It's just that it's not what my parents were listening to. Mm-hmm. And so I was too young to really seek it out on my own, though I certainly knew who he was. And funnily, it wasn't until this musical, really, when I saw this show, that I came home. I saw it on tour in Greenville, South Carolina, and I came home. I was just blown away by this show. And so I come home and I'm telling my boys about it, and we start listening to Michael Jackson's music. And it was really then that I kind of wormed my way down into his catalog and got way more familiar with it than just kind of that cursory awareness of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I learned, there were some songs that I knew, Billie Jean and Beat It and Thriller. Everybody knew of those songs. But I didn't get into the deep cuts and the B-sides until the boys and I were kind of exploring his catalog. And really, it was because of seeing this musical. So it opened a new world to me.
Is not just the big hits. Like, lots of these B-sides, are part of it. That's what I was struck by when I was starting to listen to it. And when I was first introduced to it, I remember just being like, music that they're choosing for this particular musical, it's not like all the major hits.
No,
we don't get a lot of, it is very centered around kind of one time in his life, but a lot of these kind of more culturally focused songs rather than poppy, just poppy bits about relationships, very much about who we are as humanity. Lots of that makes it into the musical. So,
and this musical is different in, we've talked about the bio musical versus the fantasy musical, Jersey Boys versus Mamma Mia. Obviously, this takes the Jersey Boys approach, but it takes a narrower approach than say Jersey Boys or Beautiful, the Carole King musical, or certainly On Your Feet, the Gloria Estefan musical, which, that musical tells her whole story, all of it, stem to stern. And, Jersey Boys does too, in a way. It doesn't start at the very beginning, but it starts when they start performing together. And MJ does not take that approach. MJ takes a very narrow sliver. And I feel we were just talking about this with Hell's Kitchen. By the way, I need to correct myself. I said it was our 5th episode. That was actually our 4th episode. So I messed up. I think you tried to correct me when I said, this is our 5th episode. And you're like, is it? Yes. And I was like, oh yeah, it's our 5th.
I do remember that.
It is definitely not our 5th. It's our 4th. This
Notice,
is our fifth.
I go with you. This is why you should always check historians.
Check and verify.
Check and verify. I did that to my theater history class yesterday. I said something that was just not true, and I need to go in there tomorrow and be like, I totally did not.
I blew it.
Like, I totally blew it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I get it. I've had to do it many times, many times. But at any rate, like we were talking about with Hell's Kitchen, which is not a direct biomusical, but nevertheless heavily inspired, she was looking for that musical at that 17th year of the main character. Here, we take an even more narrow window where we're looking at 2 or 3 days in the summer of 1992. And we'll talk about reasons for that down the line, but it's a very narrow window where we're looking at Michael Jackson's creative process for creating the Dangerous Tour in 1992, the summer of 1992.
Dangerous.
Yeah.
I love that album.
Yeah.
It's a good album, you know?
It's a great album.
Great album.
It's a great album. Like all of his music, it holds up. It's unbelievable.
Really does.
Now, in case you have been living under a rock for the last 5 decades, let me just very briefly go through Michael Jackson's biography. I do think it's helpful because I think that, for kids like us, I mean, kids, we're almost 50, but, I still think of myself as a kid.
I know. I don't, yeah.
But for the actual kids, the people that we're teaching and younger, the ones that we're seeing on college campuses and younger, it might be helpful to hear a little bit of his backstory because they didn't grow up knowing it like we certainly would have. So Michael was the 7th of Joe and Catherine Jackson's 9 children. They actually had a 10th, Brandon, but he died shortly after he was born. So Michael is the 7th of 9. He was born in Gary, Indiana, so right across the river from Chicago, Illinois. So that gives you a sense of, he was in this smaller area, but nevertheless had access to a big city in Chicago. They lived in this tiny little house. I cannot imagine 11 people in a house that was basically the size of a garage, not much bigger than a garage. And they lived, one right on top of the other, right? His brothers, as you can imagine, given that they would later form the band, the Jackson 5, were very musical. And one time they heard little Michael at 5 years old imitating them singing. And so one of the brothers said, you know what? This kid's got something. He should be our lead singer. And isn't that kind of ironic?
That the little one
shall be, like the little brother takes front and center. But it was just very clear from very early on that this kid had a panache that was really unusual. So they start off performing. His first public performance was when he was 7 years old, and it's talent shows. I don't think we have anything equivalent to that nowadays. Maybe connected to a county fair or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. But these would be talent shows where people would come and do whatever it's kind of like America's Got Talent on a grassroots level.
Yeah, smaller scale, much smaller.
Yeah. And so they would perform at these types of things starting when Michael was about 7. And before long, they went from local gigs like that. And then eventually they were opening for national acts. Like they would go and open for a band in Detroit or, anywhere kind of in the Midwest where they could drive to. Their parents had a Volkswagen minibus, and all 9 kids and both parents would pile in there.
Who cares about seatbelts? I remember that time.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden they started talking about seatbelts, and then everybody had a double buckle and things like that. And we were like, this is not going to save us. But okay.
Right,
but it's like, everybody pile in. It doesn't sit on the floor. It's all good.
That's right. So they would pile into that, definitely without seatbelts, and pile into that Volkswagen microbus or minivan, whatever you want to call it. And they opened for the likes of the Temptations. So we all know the Temptations, My Girl, etc. There's a Jukebox musical that could tell you all about them. Etta James, Sunday Kind of Love. Gladys Knight and the Pips, one of my favorites, with Midnight Train to Georgia, etc. So they were opening for some really, really big acts. And it's not surprising that when Michael was 11, just 4 years later, he and his brothers rather, were signed by Motown Records, Berry Gordy and Motown Records. there's a Motown jukebox musical that we may have a chance to talk about at some point.
Hmm.
But Berry Gordy, of course, was the founder of Motown Records, which was the sound of a generation. I mean, they were responsible, Motown was responsible for groups like The Temptations and Gladys Knight and the Pips and Diana Ross and the
Hmm.
Supremes. And I mean, on and on and on and on. Smokey Bill Robinson, you name it, if they were big in the 60s and early 70s, they probably were coming out of Motown. And Berry Gordy was the mastermind behind that. So he signs Michael and his brothers in 1969, and they put out a single. Now, they'd had some local radio hits, nothing big, nothing national.
Hmm.
Just they had recorded prior to this, but this was their big national contract. This is when they hit the mainstream. And their first single was I Want You Back. Bum, ba-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da, da, 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 da,
Bum,
da,
bum,
da.
bum. Yeah.
So, not surprisingly, that one goes number one, and their next three releases, so their first four singles go number one.
Yeah.
Immediately, they are, it just takes off immediately. Their song ABC came next. Believe it or not, it ousted the Beatles' Let It Be from the number one position
That's
on the charts.
hilarious.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. But look
Then
at
they had, go ahead.
it's a good idea to start with I Want You Back because that shows off Michael's vocals so much more than
Yes.
ABC does,
Yeah.
And if
Yeah,
you had
absolutely.
started with ABC, you wouldn't have gotten the big, movement behind them like we
Yeah.
want more.
That's a
Yeah.
great point. That's a great point. And knowing Barry Gordy and how savvy
He's
he
very
was,
smart.
I'm
Yeah,
sure he
very.
was thinking of that. Like
Yeah,
this showcases Michael more than any of the others. That's a great point that I
exactly.
hadn't thought of. But yeah, so then ABC, then they have a hit called The Love You Save, and then they slow it way down
Yeah.
with I'll Be There.
Yeah.
But we hear Michael's voice do different things in I'll Be There.
Hmm.
Right, we hear his range in that song. So the nation is immediately captivated with this band called the Jackson Five, but particularly with its lead singer, 11-year-old Michael Jackson.
Hmm.
He's compared to James Brown.
Yeah.
He's compared to all the greats. He's got the moves, and a lot of those moves, a lot of those dance moves that he became so known for, he picked up really by when they would be opening for these bigger acts, he would be imitating everything they did backstage.
Yeah.
So it was like a master class for him as he is a little sponge soaking up all of these incredible artists that he and his
Hmm.
brothers were opening for.
I mean, and
Um,
and don't you wish you still had that spongeness? I wish I
yes,
did.
yes, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. So at any rate, in the early 1970s, not long after the Jackson Five hits it big with Motown, Michael also starts doing some recording projects on his own, but nothing big, nothing really hits, nothing, to speak of. But he decides he really wants to prove that he can go it on his own as he gets older. So as he gets into his late teens and early 20s, he's like, I need to do something on my own. And so that's when we see him playing the Scarecrow in the
Yeah.
1978 film The Wiz. The Wiz was the first show we ever talked about. Won the Tony Award for Best Musical, I believe, in 1976. And then the film comes out in 1978. Michael plays the Scarecrow opposite Diana Ross, his Motown buddy,
Yeah.
in the film adaptation of The Wiz.
And they write a new song for him that
Right.
fits his voice better and
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of changes in that from the stage show.
Yeah, when you get a talent like Michael, you tailor things to meet
Michael.
his
Yes.
great abilities, right? So after that, not long after that, that was 1978. Then in August of 1979, the month he turns 21, 21, 21. Oh my gosh. He was such a baby, but yet not. He releases a solo album called Off the Wall.
Hmm.
And Off the Wall was produced by the great Quincy Jones, who is a man almost as iconic as Jackson. So it's produced by Quincy Jones, a great producer who's been attached to all the great acts, many, many, many of the great acts of the last several decades. And this album, Off the Wall, produces 2 top 10 hits, the title track Off the Wall, another
Mm-hmm.
song called She's Out of My Life. And it also produces 2 number 1 hits, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough and Rock With You.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is the first time a solo artist has ever had 4 top 10 hits from the same album.
Hmm.
This album sold 6 million copies and won Michael his first ever Grammy. And believe it or not, even with that 6 million copies sold, 4 top 10 hits, 2 of which go to number 1, wins a Grammy, Michael's not satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
Michael's goal is to produce and record the best-selling album of all time. Like, that's what he wants to do. And he speaks that out loud to Quincy Jones and to a writing partner, a songwriting partner of his. And they kind of laugh at him like, oh, great, Michael, that's a great idea. But but let's just make some more music and not worry about that, right? Let's just make some more music. And so that's exactly what they do. They make enough music to come out with Michael's next release, which is one called Thriller, an album called Thriller that's released in November of 1982. And this one, where the previous one had 4 top 10 hits, this one has 7 singles reach the top 10. 7 in the top. Like, how many tracks are on an album in the 80s? 10? Maybe 11?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, you get 5 on each side, really.
And notice on like your list of the 7 singles, Thriller is not on there. And everybody knows Thriller.
Right.
It just wasn't airplayed the same way. So 8, I mean, you have, like, that's still a song that everybody knows.
Right.
Like, you could sing all of the 7 on that list, but then you put Thriller in there, and there's only 2 songs on that album that were like, oh yeah, kind of throwaway. No, like, that's insane.
It's
8?
crazy. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen.
No.
So let me just name some of these. The Girl Is Mine, Billie Jean, Beat It, Wanna Be Starting Something, which my boys have heard 973,000 times because I think it's my favorite. I love it so much. I'll say to one of them when they're trying to pick a fight with the other, I'm like, you just want to be starting something. Human Nature, PYT, Pretty Young Thing.
And then we get Thriller.
But of course, yeah, and then Thriller. But of course, Beat It and Billie Jean hit number 1. The album wins a record-breaking 8 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year. And guess what? It sells 70 million copies, making it the greatest selling album of all time.
Yeah.
He, I will remind you, was 24 years old. Now, I think that his biography from there, you probably are familiar with. My boys often will ask me when I say somebody was very famous, they'll want me to put him in context of, was he Michael Jackson famous? Like, and I'm like, well, I would say probably Elvis and Taylor Swift were Michael Jackson famous. Beyond that, I don't know that I can come up with any other on his level, right? In the modern era. But they always want me to put stars, as we talk about them, in the context of Michael. And I'm like, it's really unmatched with very few exceptions. All told, he sold 500 million albums. He had 13 number 1s, 13 Grammy Awards. And after his death in 2009, Berry Gordy, again, the founder and president of Motown Records, who had signed Michael and his brothers when Michael was 11 years old, wrote a foreword. They republished Michael's autobiography, and Berry Gordy wrote in the foreword to that, Michael Jackson was not an artist who comes along once in a decade, a generation, or a lifetime. He was an artist who comes along once, period. And I think that's hard to argue with.
He has a lot of the, in musical theater, we call it the triple threat, right? Usually you have, when you're looking at students, it's very hard to find a triple threat, somebody who is equally, unlike, like, exceptional singer, exceptional dancer, exceptional actor. It's very rare. Usually we privilege one over the other. And he seems like that. I mean, if you want to compare him to Taylor Swift can dance. But I don't think anybody would be like, you can dance like Michael. She dances just like Michael Jansen, like
right.
as good as Michael Jackson
iconic.
did. She's not starting
Taylor's
iconic.
style.
No,
right.
You're not, like, at all. And,
yeah, that's true.
And she is, I mean, she's a big thing,
Yeah, no doubt about it.
I mean, I feel like looking back on Michael, like, she feels bigger almost. And I don't know if that's because we have more access.
Yes.
And the technology is different than it was when Michael Jackson around. And so they probably are maybe more comparable, but he's as close to that triple threat as you can get. Is he a musical not in like musical theater terms, like he's a great actor, because he's not a great actor. We know that.
Right.
We've seen that.
Right.
But he can dance, and that man can sing, and he does it better than anybody. And
no doubt about it.
Everybody is copying that style on both sides of the aisle. So that,
Yeah.
And that's hard to find.
Yeah, no question. He wrote or co-wrote the lion's share of his music. So he was, again, the comparison to Taylor Swift. I mean, he was writing a lot of that music. I don't know that Elvis was writing his own music.
Yeah, I don't think he was.
I don't know that. I don't
he
think
also
he
wasn't dancing.
No, except he would move his, shake that pelvis. That was
I guess you're right.
Pelvis Elvis move. But that's
but
Johnny one note.
But we never saw that because they just were like, let's just show his cute little face, because I don't know what he's doing down there.
Waist up. We got to see the guitar. But nothing else. Yeah, but Michael Jackson created, and we'll talk about this again in a few minutes, he created really his own dance vocabulary. Right? I mean, there were things. Now, the moonwalk is credited to have started with Michael, but it really didn't. There were other people doing that. He just took it mainstream. But a lot of the other dance moves, there's this beautiful scene in the show where it talks about some of his dance idols, one of them being Bob Fosse.
Wow, yeah. And you see that.
See them, but when Bob Fosse connection, then you're just like, oh, of course he wore a glove. Because he loved Fosse, and Fosse, that was all about the hand. You know what I mean? It makes so much sense when you know that. But anyway, there's this beautiful scene where you see him in a kind of a dream sequence dancing with his biggest influences in dance, one of them being Bob Fosse. And it's a beautiful moment in the show. And when you see it, you're like, oh my gosh, yes, they do such a brilliant job of showing how he was impacted by those who came before him. It's a really beautiful scene. Of course, very tragically, he passed away very suddenly and shockingly in June of 2009. I think he was 51 years old. Mm-hmm. I was on a treadmill at the gym. I will never forget it. Coming up on every TV.
The amount of I was going to ask the same thing, like, where were you when Michael died? Like,
where were you?
I was in the Clarice Smith Performing Arts Center at the University of Maryland. We were in the grad office, and I was like, that was like a very early report came through, and I remember getting home, and by the time we got home, people were like, I think I should wait and see if this is actually true. And I'm like, it's true, y'all. It's all over the news now.
Yeah.
Like, and it went on for days.
Oh, days. Yeah. Well, every TV, I was in this gym in Lexington, Kentucky. There were probably, there's 30 treadmills and 30 TVs on a wall in front of them. And every one of them was on CNN saying Michael Jackson, King of Pop, dead at 51 or whatever. Mm-hmm. Just shocking. Yeah. Absolutely shocking.
And not from an overdose that he was doing his own drugs. He had a doctor who was administering this drug cocktail still.
Yes. And the doctor later convicted of involuntary manslaughter for his role in Michael Jackson's death. Yeah. So
which is where we learned about propofol.
Yeah.
Propofol? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's it. Now, having said all of that, of course, to know Michael Jackson's career is to know that there was a taint to his legacy it was a tainted legacy that he had without doubt, right? He was accused in 1993 for the first time of sexual abuse. At that point, he was accused of abusing as many as 4 young boys. Of course, there was a full-scale investigation. A member of the investigative team spoke to a reporter for the Los Angeles Times who said there's no medical evidence, no taped evidence. The search warrant didn't result in anything that would support a criminal filing. Jackson insisted he was innocent and settled out of court with the victims.
And if you
You know,
remember this time, like, this
yeah,
was a big story. 'Cause
big time.
this is not the first, obviously, but like, we think now about, the scandals surrounding celebrities, and this was one of the really big ones that I remember kind of bringing it to my attention that these kinds of
Yeah,
things happened, and
yeah,
the amount of people who were like, "Oh my gosh, he totally did that," and then there's no way to, like, there's no evidence, and so they have to
right,
rethink it and then say, well, then if he was so innocent, why did he settle out of court? Like, this was a very
right.
big discussion. And now we know
Yeah.
there's tons of people who's like, I will settle it. It doesn't matter
Just to
because
make it go away.
it needs to
Yeah.
go away,
Yes, of
and
course.
we know that now, but at the time, like, it was such a topic of conversation because so many people were like, why isn't he standing up and fighting for it? And I'm like,
Yeah.
because what good is that gonna,
Yeah.
it's just
He
going to
needs
put more information out there.
That's
And
right. That's right. He needs to make this get out of the news cycle. And so by paying someone off and making them sign an NDA saying you can't talk anymore about this, it gets out of the news cycle, right?
yeah,
Regardless of whether or not he's innocent or guilty. It is a very complicated conversation when you talk about Michael Jackson because he has this unmatched, probably, body of work, but he also has these allegations that I don't know if they're true or false, but I know you have to acknowledge them when you
hmm
talk about him. You have to say, I don't know what's true, but I gotta show both sides of this coin, right?
yeah. And
So go
that
ahead.
is the hard thing about, Michael, and
Yeah.
in his way, is that we all have had to wrestle with,
Yes.
what do we do with this? Like, what do we
Yeah.
do with this artist and this person? And the thing is that Michael shows us very keenly the power of technology, the power of press, the power of TV, in a way where, I mean, let me just tell you some stories about Richard Rodgers that have come out
Right.
over time
Oh, of
that no
course.
one ever knew about. And
Right.
now we're like, holy moly. Like,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
you look at all of these, like, big celebrity people that, did some things that are again, they're dead, so we don't know if it's true or not, but, like,
Right. And they can't defend themselves.
and they can't defend themselves, but at the
Yeah.
same time, like, there wasn't insatiable curiosity about their lives because there's no way to follow them around.
Yes.
You didn't have that
Yes.
kind of access. And Michael really is the first one that the media is so into because he's so popular
Yes.
that, this becomes, uh, you know, it's the rise of reality TV. It's the rise of the
Well,
real world, and now we're doing it
yes.
into his life and not into the lives of teenagers in New York City.
Well, and you know what? The other thing to point out here is really this is at the front of the 24-hour news cycle.
Yes.
So it was right around 1991, the Persian Gulf War,
Yes.
when we start having 24-hour, I think CNN was
Do you
the
remember? Yeah.
first. Totally. Wolf Blitzer, I
I
remember
remember. Yes.
vividly.
Oh, because
I
we
was
thought the world.
12,
Yeah, I was like,
13,
I think it was
14.
13
Gosh,
because
over.
I thought I was 12.
Yeah, no,
It's something about
yeah.
like that. But I do remember,
Middle
like,
school.
we thought the world was ending, and so they had, if you had cable,
Yes.
you had it on CNN because
Yes.
CNN didn't go to another program. It was the
No.
first time we, like, went to cable news.
Yes.
CNN gets its major rise from these, like, this kind of an event. Because beforehand, all my parents watched was the nightly news on
That's all we
whatever.
had,
Because that's
right?
all we had. And
Yes.
now it's like, I need more up-to-date information. They're not telling us things fast enough on the network newses.
Right.
So I need, I'll just keep it on. It's the first time I remember as a child having the TV on to news, like just having it on. Like my
Constantly.
parents,
Background noise.
yeah, my parents were not like that. It was like the first time we ever ate dinner with the news on.
Yeah.
And I just remember us all just being so like, I don't know what's happening, but it
Yes.
changed our world.
It completely did. And think before that, we had, you're right, the nightly news. So there were the three networks with their nightly news, which was 30 minutes or an hour.
Hmm.
And then you had the newspaper, which came
Yeah.
out the next morning. So that those were the two sources. Well, suddenly, we certainly didn't have internet for instant access to information, but suddenly 1990-ish, we have 24-hour news cycle, and that, you're right, is like takes off like wildfire because of the Persian Gulf War. And then we have a network that has to fill its time. When there's no
Yeah.
war, what are we going to talk about? Well, let's talk nonstop about Michael Jackson's accusers. And then it became, let's talk nonstop about OJ Simpson and
Yeah.
his case.
Yes.
I mean, this
Because
is
it could
OJ
fill
Simpson.
time.
It could fill time. So they would have 57 different talking heads come in and give their opinions on opinions, I say, opinions,
Hmm.
not necessarily factually based opinions, to fill time. And, this accusation against Jackson comes in 1993. OJ Simpson was 1994. So
Hmm.
this is all part of a cultural shift that we had
Massive
never
cultural
experienced
shift.
before. And you're right, had it happened in 1947, would it have been
Or even if it had happened in the 80s,
1987? Yes.
it would not have come out the way it did.
You're absolutely right.
It is interesting how, like, moments, historical moments, change how history is played out.
Yes,
I
without
just
doubt. And the advent of the
Cable
24-hour
news.
news cycle changed
This is all
so
cable's
much.
fault. Let's just say it. Like, we'll
I
just
think
get
it's
rid of
still
cable.
cable's fault.
It's
I think
all
everything is
cable
still
news.
cable's
Yeah,
fault. Yeah.
exactly.
But at any rate, that it is an interesting timing point to say. Having said that, while there was no evidence to support these claims, that doesn't mean they're not true. That's
Hmm.
just to say there was no evidence found to support it. Michael didn't help himself, because Michael increasingly exhibited very bizarre behavior,
Yeah.
right? There was some real crazy things he did, that did not help his public persona whatsoever. And one of them was 2003, a documentary came out called Living with Michael Jackson.
Oh,
And in
who
it,
who let him do this?
thank you. That's what I say. He doesn't help himself.
Who's
I know.
Please tell me
I
he
know.
didn't pay a publicist during this time or some marketing. Like, who's responsible for this one?
I wish I knew. I wish
Someone
I
needs
knew.
to tell the artist, no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, this is a real bad look, Michael. But do you tell Michael Jackson no? I
Yes.
don't know if you do. I mean, I think they should have, but I don't know if you can, you know?
Sometimes, if they do it over the top of you. But
Yeah.
I don't remember anybody coming on and be like, I told him not to do this,
Right.
And it's either he didn't have it or his people were just, I don't know.
I don't know either.
I do
don't know
remember
either.
going, what in the
I know,
world
I know.
is this
It's like,
business?
Michael, I want to believe you, but oh my gosh, this is not making it easy.
And it's 10 years later, and we
Yeah.
are a different society. We've
Totally
gone through,
different.
and it was it 97 that we get the John Benet Ramsey case.
Yes,
People are
97.
fascinated with that, but also like this, a huge, because of the 24 news cycle, we're
Yeah.
learning more and more about children being victimized and
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff, and you just kind of go,
Yeah, this was
Oh,
crazy.
this
So-
isn't. It's kind of like he thought this was going to explain things,
Gosh.
and I do remember watching it, and I remember going, "Here's what I'm gaining from this. You, got fame way too early.
Yeah.
You don't know how to deal with it,
Yeah.
and there's no one here to teach you how to be an adult. And
Arrested Development.
and you have been like stunted in many
Yeah.
ways, and for that I can have sympathy and empathy for.
Absolutely, without doubt. Yeah, there's definitely Arrested Development. He would say, "These were my friends. These were my buddies." I mean, he was always seen with Macaulay Culkin,
Yeah.
and
And notice
Macaulay
Macaulay,
Culkin, who defends him to this day and says
Yeah.
he never did anything inappropriate to me. But let me tell you about this 2003 documentary, Living with Michael Jackson. In it, he holds hands with little boys, and he describes how he would share his bed with them,
I know,
and
just,
how he thought it was such a beautiful thing for him to do that. And it may have been completely innocent, but it is nonetheless bizarre,
And
particularly
problematic.
when you Yes, particularly when you have been accused of the things that he had been accused of. Why in the world would you do this?
Well, and we're looking at this with 2025 eyes. Remember, this is way back, I mean, we're talking almost 22 years ago when this comes
Yes.
out.
Yes.
And we're at the very beginning of this where it's like, we know we have to be so much more careful.
Yes.
Like,
But even then, I mean, like we were saying, I do remember watching thinking, Michael, I want to believe you, but this is
this
very
is, yeah,
difficult
it's
to
like,
believe. Like,
Michael.
this
Yeah.
is not, what the heck are you doing?
You've got,
Again, of
there,
course, in the wake of this documentary, an investigation is opened. A social worker
because
goes,
because of this, because
yes,
he's telling this to the world, they open a, yeah.
yes, yes. Like he invites it. Not he's not intentionally inviting it, but by his actions, he invited this. And a social worker says at the time that any accusations of impropriety were unfounded. They found no reason to believe that he had done anything wrong. But nevertheless, the prosecutors do pursue a jury trial. He's charged with multiple counts of molestation, and a jury found him not guilty in 2005. A juror came out afterwards and said, "We expected better evidence, something that was a little more convincing, but it just wasn't there."
Okay,
So
so we probably need to talk about all the stuff that's going on,
now,
like in the 90s and early 2000s in Los Angeles with the
oh,
police department.
oh gosh, yes, of
I
course, that
mean,
connects. Yes, go.
there's quite a
You're
so
better positioned to talk about that
so
than
there's
I
quite
am.
a bit of we look at the poor LAPD, and they
Yeah.
don't. They're another ones that doesn't help themselves. But
No.
you look at the relationship with the between the PD and the prosecutor's office, and there are some issues there. But if you look back at the '93 riots and the charging of the officers over Rodney King, and people saying basically double jeopardy, like they got tried twice and things like that.
Right.
You look at that one. You can look at Michael Jackson. You can look at where it's like we don't have any evidence, but the prosecutors are going after it anyway. And you have to ask
Yeah.
yourself, why are you doing
Why?
that? It's because there's
Absolutely.
all of a sudden there's public pressure because of what they see. So the prosecutors don't have any evidence. Like they have nothing and they go ahead with trial, which right there, I mean, we were all like, maybe he did
Yeah.
do it. But if there's
Yeah.
but I mean, most trial attorneys would not do this. Like, what
Right.
are, so there's some, I think there's just a lot going on in Los Angeles. I lived there
No
during the
doubt.
time, and I just
Yes.
remember being like, it was one of the first times I remember going, this is for show. This is for the news cycles. This is for Entertainment Tonight.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
this is why we're doing this.
And isn't that an indictment on our justice system? One of many indictments on our justice system where they'll do that.
Yeah, and
because
he had a back problem during it and
Yeah.
was struggling to show up, showed up in his pajamas, and the big thing about him showing up in his PJs or not showing
Right.
up, and
Right.
they were going to take him into custody if he didn't show up, and the man could not stand up or so. It was
Yes.
just like, this is
a lot.
this is a show trial. It
Yes.
started feeling like a show trial, and
Right.
it made people kind of go, I don't know what the truth is. There's no such truth. There's no truth anywhere. And I was like,
Right.
and because what I'm seeing doesn't make sense.
Right.
So,
And in light of what we've just talked about with the OJ and the 24-hour news cycle and the show trial,
the OJ
imagine
trial.
why Chicago hits like it does in 1996.
Oh yeah.
Because
Well,
this is the zeitgeist, right?
Yeah.
This is what we're all going through as a culture. And so Chicago hits, and it is nothing if not a show about show trials. And it is a
if
massive
it
hit,
doesn't
obviously
fit,
still
you must
running.
acquit.
Yeah, exactly.
And
So, yeah.
it just the first generation of us looking at the justice system and going, I don't think anybody can get a fair trial anymore.
Yeah, right.
And
right.
you go, oh my gosh, Like, oh my gosh, like
That's a
that just came
paradigm
out of my
shift.
mouth.
Yes, that's a
Like,
paradigm shift. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, then again in 2019, 10 years posthumous for Michael, there is another documentary that comes out. We'll talk about it more in just a few minutes, but it's called Leaving Neverland. And it's an HBO documentary about two men who said Jackson had abused them as children. Now, both of these men who were
Mm-hmm.
featured in this documentary had tried to bring a suit against the Jackson estate in 2013 and 2014, respectively. But both cases were dismissed, not due to lack of evidence so much as due to the statute of
But
limitations.
yeah.
Like, why had you not brought these sooner? Um,
Especially when in 2003, when you say that this happened before then,
yeah,
like when this is
right.
all, why didn't you join that one?
Right. So,
Now, I do know why. I do know what their rationalization from is. They were young, they weren't ready to
yes,
talk about it. I
right.
get that. But
Yeah.
that's why the statute of limitations was kind of like,
Yeah.
why
Where
are we
were
doing
you?
this again?
Right. So their cases are dismissed. The documentary comes out in 2019. Their cases are subsequently dismissed October of 2020 and April of 2021. However, in August of 2023, an appellate court reversed those two dismissals
Decision.
and allowed the cases to continue. So in February of 2024, the two cases were made into one case against the Jackson estate. And excuse me, I just confirmed this last night to be sure it's the latest, most up to date information. A jury trial, excuse me, is
She's
set for
dying.
2026.
2026. So we're going to now do this. We're going to redo this
Okay.
again.
Yeah. Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so now we've had basically two times where there's been, some sort of legal aspect of it. Now we're going to do it again.
Yes. Yes. And so,
I'm sure
we
in
have
front of
spent-
everyone.
Yes, of course. And it will be it'll be everything the news is talking about for months.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, we have spent a huge amount of time talking about these allegations, but that's the fact of the matter with Michael Jackson. You cannot talk about him without acknowledging that there are some massive allegations against him. We are not in a position to say, are they true or are they false? We do not know.
No.
But we do have to acknowledge that they exist.
Mm-hmm.
We do have to say, these things happened, but there's still this body of work, right? Like, it's a very difficult thing to grapple with. Well, do we, there are those in society today who would say, well, we just have to forget all that he did and cancel it all. There are others, and that's the approach that the creative team for MJ took, that said, listen, if we're going to do away with Michael Jackson's body of work because of these allegations, which have been so far proven to be unfounded, that he's never been um, uh, convicted of. If we're going to have to do away with the bodies of work of a whole lot of people, right? So there is this question connected to MJ the musical of, can we separate the art from the artist? And the creative team of MJ the Musicals says, absolutely we can, and we should. And so I'm going to get now that we've acknowledged the allegations and we have said, here they are, we don't know the truth, but here is what has been claimed against this man. Now let's talk about the development of MJ the Musical. And that starts with a producer named Leah Volek. Leah Volek has an amazing story that I go to in more detail in my book, Jukebox Musicals. But basically, she started as a teenager as a roadie for rock and roll bands. I love this, that she goes on the road and loves it. But after just a few years, like maybe 4 years, she realizes this is not the life for me. She wanted more stability. So as a young woman, I should say, in her early 20s, she decides to get off the road and settle in New York. And she works as a sound designer, and she's really, really good at it. And it's so good. She's so good at it that eventually, this doesn't happen immediately, obviously, but eventually she becomes the Sony Pictures executive in charge of music for film and theater. Big, huge job. And this woman who has, her beginnings in rock and roll and who has done sound designing and who now is in charge of film and theater music for Sony Pictures decides she wants to produce a Michael Jackson biomusical. And so her first call is to a playwright. Of course, she's going to need a librettist. So she first makes a phone call to playwright Lynn Nottage.
And what
Lynn
year is
Nottage
this that they're making these phone calls?
This is probably 2015, well, probably 2016, 17,
So
thereabouts.
after the 2003 trial.
But before the 2019.
Okay,
exactly.
before the documentary.
And the 2019 will come up again
Okay.
before the end of the story. But yes, it is after that, and it is before 2019 when the Leaving Neverland documentary comes out. So she calls up Lynn Nottage. Lynn Nottage is a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright. In fact, she's the first and only woman to win 2 Pulitzers for her playwriting.
And they're great. I mean, they're great
Yes.
shows.
2009's Ruined, 2017 Sweat. So this woman is accomplished. In addition to Pulitzer, she's got, MacArthur Grant. I mean, like, you name it,
And she's done it.
She's
not like a musical theater.
No.
No, like this is somebody who writes straight theater, essentially.
Plays, yes. Yes.
And I always think that that's an amazing thing to listen to and think about how many, when you get somebody who's got a writing background in more what I call the straight theater rather than the musical theater.
Yeah.
Like that they sometimes write the jukebox musicals a little better.
And we see that happening a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Christopher Diaz, well, no, I guess I was going to say Hell's Kitchen, Christopher Diaz, his big musical, he had written musical before, but we are seeing more legit playwrights,
so then
as we might call them.
Yeah, you go back
to be librettists.
Or TV.
Television, yes. David
with,
West Reed.
Yes, that's who I was going for.
Juliet. Yes.
And,
definitely.
Wasn't the guy that did, I can't remember these names. I'm horrible with names. The Neil Diamond musical.
Oh, gosh.
Hold on.
I should know that, but I don't.
It's okay. But the same thing. They're all, like, none of them are like, I write for musical theater. Like,
right. No, absolutely.
They are,
and that, but I mean, I think that's part of the jukebox thing. And that's one of the reasons why traditionalists were so initially against it, was because you had songwriters who weren't musical theater writers. And then we're bringing in librettists who aren't musical theater writers. And it's like, wait a minute, who are these people coming in? So
that?
Lynn Nottage is definitely a brilliant playwright, but Tracy's absolutely right. Librettos is not her, bread and butter by any stretch of the imagination.
Anthony McCartan was the guy that wrote.
I don't remember that name at all. It's been too
Neil
long
Diamond.
since we talked about that. That does not sound familiar at all.
Well, it's in our notes.
I believe you. I'm just don't
looking
remember
at
it.
I looked it up.
Perfect. I do believe you. Gosh, there are so many other names in my brain.
I know.
That one's gone. At any rate, so she's immediately interested. Michael Jackson's early albums were the soundtrack to her youth, so of course she has an emotional connection to this work, as most of us do. So she says, yes, I'll do it. And they obviously decide to take that biomusical track a la Jersey Boys. And they decide, as I've already mentioned, to set this in this very narrow slice of Michael Jackson's life, 2 days in the early summer of 1992. And where we see them where we first encounter them in this show is that Michael and his team of dancers are in a studio rehearsing for the Dangerous Tour, which was a 69 city tour happening over the summer of 1992. And the setup is that a fictional MTV reporter is going to embed with the tour to capture what it means to be Michael Jackson. And so you see that if you've seen the show, or if you're going to see the show, you'll see there is this fictional MTV reporter, and she's constantly interviewing Michael. And that really gives the character of Michael the chance to give the insights as to why he does what he does. If this sounds a little bit familiar, if you grew up watching MTV in this period of time, you'll know that an MTV News reporter named Sonia Saw actually did embed
Mm-hmm.
with the Dangerous tour. She would talk to crew members and audience members and combine those interviews with concert footage and aired what were called Dangerous Diaries. These were little 15-minute clips that aired on MTV throughout the run of that tour.
Isn't that
But
where we get
Michael was
the
not interviewed in
no?
those.
But isn't that where we get the video of the guy in it might have been Korea jumping up on his platform and Michael having to hold on to him. He's like, he's gonna fall off of this. He was on one of those.
Maybe.
He was out there and he scaled it and somehow got like on that big mechanical arm that they flew him on.
Yes. I don't know. I don't
Do you
think I've
remember
seen
that?
No,
Okay.
not at all. Not
See,
at
we're
all.
gonna have to find now. I'm gonna have to find it and put it
We'll
on
find
social
it.
media.
We'll look for it. Yes, we'll look for it and post it if we can find it. So that was, it was not an exact replica of what Sonia Saw has done. Because, like I said, Sonia was talking to crew members and people in the audience, and what this fictional reporter in the show does is talk to Michael himself. And so there is a distinction, but nevertheless,
Mm-hmm.
it's a parallel, and it may ring familiar to you if you are someone of my age and Tracy's age. You may think, I've heard this story before.
Yeah.
This seems familiar. So, what Nottage said was, we want to look at the pieces of his life. What were the ingredients of his genius? I really wanted to unpack who he was and get inside of the machine. People just don't know how much Michael was in control of his own art.
Yeah.
This image of a gentle, soft spoken man trumped the reality of a brilliant businessman, producer, songwriter, and designer. So they get to work on this show about that very narrow sliver of Jackson's life in 1992. You'll notice
So it avoids.
92 is before 1993, right?
So it avoids all of that. Yeah.
It does. And they would say that's not why they picked that time. And maybe it's not. They know why they picked it, but it's an interesting decision to not pick a later tour, right?
Yeah.
So at any rate, the show is originally titled Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. And Leah Volek, producer, and Lynn Nottage, librettist, get to a point where
Oh
they're
my
like,
gosh,
okay.
that title is gonna become a liability here in about 5.5 seconds.
Yeah, we changed
Don't
that.
stop. Wait. No, I remember this because they had been talking about it, like following Broadway, and I've been hearing chirps in the background that they
Yes.
were doing this Michael Jackson musical forever. I mean, it's been forever, and they've been very vocal about we're doing this.
Yeah.
Maybe that was wise to kind of gauge people's reaction to that. But yeah, looking at title "Don't Stop Till You Get Enough," it's like, ooh, no.
Yeah,
Pick something else.
Right. Well, and they ultimately
and they do. Good.
And let me point out that this was the title pre-2019.
Okay, there
And
we go.
2019, yeah, I will remind you, is when Leaving Neverland comes out.
Okay.
And that's when some things about the show change.
That's
so
when
I do want to point
immediately.
that out. Yes.
Okay, we need
yes.
a new title.
Yes. So that was the title pre-2019. Let me make that very, very clear. But Nottage and Volek get to a point where they're working on the show, and we see this over and over and over as we talk about the development, where they're like, okay, we've got enough of this that we need a director. So let's find a director. And they find one who does not at first glance seem like the most logical choice.
No sense to me whatsoever.
It doesn't make sense, except it kind of does make sense. So let me tell you why.
Okay.
His name is Christopher Wheeldon, and he is the reason why we're both like, this is an odd choice. And Wheeldon himself would be like, did they call the right person? I'm not sure they meant to call me.
Yeah.
He's trained in classical ballet. He's a British native, and he trained at the Royal Ballet School in London. He then becomes soloist for the New York City Ballet and is their first ever resident choreographer. Now, he choreographs a show on Broadway in 2002, The Sweet Smell of Success.
Which is not a heavy choreographed thing.
Nor is it a show that we still talk about. I mean, it ran for 109 performances,
Yeah.
but he got great reviews. Yeah, he got great reviews for his work as a choreographer. But after that, in 2002, he goes back to ballet. That's definitely where he is most comfortable.
Yeah,
Well, in
and this
2015,
is where we know him from.
Yes.
Like his name from.
Yes, exactly. In 2015, he's brought back to Broadway to direct a stage adaptation of the Gershwin 1951 film An American in Paris.
And it's
Um,
gorgeous,
it
y'all.
is
I mean, I saw
gorgeous.
it on tour, and I just remember just being like, okay, I wish I had more of a frame to appreciate what I'm seeing, but I
Yes.
know that what I'm
Well, and
seeing
he
is
was
pretty
obviously,
amazing.
as George Gershwin composed symphonies, right? I mean, his
Hmm.
were classical compositions, so it would make sense to have a ballet choreographer to be the choreographer for that music. But he was brought on not just as a choreographer, but he was also asked to direct An American in Paris. And was very hesitant to take the job. He said, I've choreographed tons, but I've never directed actors. I'm not sure I'm the right person to do this. But he was talked into it and he did it, and it was very successful. I mean, that show, you're
It's
so right, is
but it's
gorgeous.
90% dance. Like
Yes,
it's mostly
yes,
dance. So I mean,
yes. And there's
directing
not right.
actors, it's not like
There's not even a whole lot of
it's
dialogue, is there?
no, not at
Yeah,
all. It's just,
yeah,
if when you're watching that show, you're watching somebody tell stories through dance, which
right.
was really, we forget about the dance storytelling sometimes. We've gotten
Yes,
so far away from Oklahoma that sometimes we forget that
yeah,
they're telling the story as well. And that they can do it very effectively. And that's
yes.
what I remember about American in Paris.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. But the music definitely lends itself more to a choreographer of ballet than
Yeah.
a traditional musical theater dance. But nevertheless, there it is. I said, nevertheless, your friend may be playing her drinking game right now. There's one for you.
For those of you
So
that don't know, that is the resident drinking game, apparently, of some of our listeners. They're picking up on nevertheless. And
every time I say nevertheless, which apparently I say a lot. I think
I
I said
like it.
apparently too.
Me too. I know. It's all
Um,
good. You're all good.
and the other one is at any rate. I find
At
myself
any
saying that a
rate,
lot. At
yes.
any rate. At any rate, he directs this American in Paris and he choreographs it. He wins a Tony Award for his choreography. Show's beautiful. And Lynn Nottage and Leah Volek decide this is the guy that we want to direct Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, which was the original title of the MJ, what would become MJ the musical. So they call him and he says, what? Me?
Yes,
Are you
and
kidding?
I say that as well. Like, what?
Yeah, what? What? He was like Lynn Nottage. He'd grown up in the 80s. He had Michael Jackson posters in his bedroom. He was a big fan of his music, but he did wonder, did they call the right person? But as had happened
Is
with An American in Paris, he was convinced to do the job.
is he the first choice, or did other people say no because of the connection between Michael Jackson and this
That's an excellent
accusation?
point. I don't know. I have not read of there being anyone. And remember, this is pre 2019. So
Yeah,
the Michael Jackson thing had kind of died down between 2003 and then he died. And then we
yeah,
kind of get
we.
wistful and just
Mm-hmm.
remember his work. And then they ramped back up again in 2019. So I had not read anywhere that they sought someone else first. And that's why I
Interesting.
said earlier, it does make sense when you think about it because of Michael's style of movement. There's so much, it's so graceful,
Okay.
even though it is kind of frenetic. I mean, it does lend itself to a different kind of choreographer. So while
Hmm.
at first glance it might seem like this is a really unusual choice, but when you step back, you're like, actually, maybe it's a brilliant choice.
Okay. I'll go
And
with you on that. I'll go
yeah,
with you.
well, I mean, maybe I'm doing some mental gymnastics to get there, but for whatever
I mean,
reason,
it
it
turned out
works.
well,
Yeah, it
so
works.
he did
So
it. He did it
yes, yes,
well.
exactly. He did it very well. So in 2018, he signs on. The show is officially announced in June as Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. And the plan is they're going to open at the Nederlander Theater in Chicago. Remember,
Hmm.
Jackson's from Gary, Indiana, so right across the river from Chicago in October of 2019.
Hmm.
Well, there's that number, 2019. January of 2019 is when Leaving Neverland, the documentary, premieres at the Sundance Film Festival, and then
Oh
it
dear.
airs on HBO in March. This is a
And we are no
show
longer opening, and we
we
are
are,
changing our title.
of course, we are. There is a British filmmaker named Dan Reed who talks to the two boys. These are the ones that I mentioned earlier who said
Who are
that they have
grown
been
men now.
abused. Yes, they are
Yeah.
now grown men. Their cases were brought first in 2013 and 2014, but dismissed due to the statute of limitations. That's the one that I was talking about. And they're the subjects who were followed in this documentary. So, of course, casual observers are appalled by Jackson's actions all over again, but those closest to Jackson are appalled that Reed doesn't show both sides of the story and doesn't
Yeah.
mention, oh, these cases were just, there's
Dismissed,
just a lot that they would say
it's hard.
was left out. It's very difficult.
It's because scandal sells more than the truth.
That's absolutely true.
That's
and
what
most
has
people
developed in the last 30 years
Yes.
with this news cycle that's 24 hours long, is that scandal and opinion and hearsay way more than the truth.
Yeah.
And so now the truth is, very, very hard to pin down.
Yes.
Because in a 24-hour news cycle, you can't actually watch it 24 hours. So even if they correct themselves later on, you've heard one thing, that's the story you're going with, and it's really hard to recorrect.
And most people don't take the time
Nope.
to dig in and say, well, according to the LA Times, the police department said there was no grounds for any sort of charges to be brought. They're not going to take the time to look into it for themselves. They just take, well, seems like a convincing documentary to me. So it is very difficult.
And
but
when money is to be made on it.
Yes.
It's one of the, what is it? It's the reason that people doubt the news now.
Of course.
It's like, and they should have doubted it years and years ago.
Always.
This has been this is not new.
No
but
doubt.
It is really becomes very, very clear in your mind that it's we exist to make money.
Right.
And if the truth isn't selling, then what do we do?
And we're not going to bite the hand that feeds us. So if someone is paying us commercial money, we're not going to represent them badly in our newscast. And that presents a conflict of interest.
We'll lose it. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's a complicated conversation that's for another podcast, but we acknowledge the complications of it. And that's all we can do is acknowledge it. But so when this hits, of course, Volek and Nottage and Wheeldon are forced to step back and really consider what are we doing here? And that's when they come to, we can separate the art from the artist. And I want to read something that Wheeldon said on a podcast rather. He admitted that it was a challenge for the team to work through Jackson's complicated history, that is, but he found the work worth doing. I'm reading now from Jukebox Musicals by Kristin Stultz Pressley, page 167. So let me read this. If you want to follow along, we had many, many, many hours of discussion about how can we create a piece of art, because it's art's place in my mind to create a space for conversation and be something that allows people to have the breathing room to interpret. We're not creating a piece of judgment. We're not documenting. It's not a piece of documentation. It's a piece of theater. It's a very difficult needle to thread, certainly, but we have made the choice that the show would be very much about Michael's process, his creative process, and we also chose a moment in time that some have said perhaps is convenient because it sort of sits right before that really controversial period sort of began. But that's not the reason we chose it. I'm not sure I buy that, but he said it, so we have to take it at face value.
Okay.
But it is convenient. I will say that. The reason we chose 1992 instead of 1993 was because by choosing that specific moment, you allow the audience then the ability to see forward without having to put ourselves in a place of judgment, because we felt like this really should open up a conversation. But in this case, we made the choice to make a show that very much focused on this incredible legacy and body of work.
And what year is it that he's saying that?
That would have been, it would have been after the show came out, so probably 2022.
Oh, okay. So this is like looking back on that time.
Yeah, he's looking back. He was interviewed on a podcast, and I thought what he had to say was I liked it.
It's very carefully crafted.
Of course it is.
And there are people that would say it's bull.
Right.
But, you do have that issue of we're gonna have to get rid of all biomusicals, all
Of course.
because there's none of these people are
Yes.
like.
And I hope you don't ever watch a Woody Allen movie again.
Oh,
I hope
gosh,
you don't listen to
yeah,
Great Balls
I
of
mean,
Fire by Jerry Lee Lewis, who married a 13-year-old in 1951 or whatever it was.
I hope
know,
you can't watch Richard Rogers and
Exactly.
anymore.
Exactly.
You can't watch.
It wipes it all out. So it is a conversation worth
If
having.
if musical theater truly is that mirror to America, sometimes like I look at some of this stuff and I go, part of that mirror is showing the flaws of the different generations as we go as we go by, and knowing that it's like we had this really like wonderful moment, and look at what happens next in his life. Look what happens next. Like, look at how he almost threw it all away.
Yeah.
Just by not thinking, like.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So I like what he has to say. I do think that the timing of 1992 versus 1993 is I mean, all we can do is take them at their word, and they say that was not why they chose it. And even if they did, it was smart, because it does allow us to,
before anything really gets
not
going,
have to deal with that. Right now, the show will ultimately be criticized for that fact, and probably rightly so. But nevertheless, that's where the creative team stands, and I respect it. I respect it. But of course, in the wake of Leaving Neverland premiering in 2019, March of 2019, really, because that's when most audiences would have seen it when it hit HBO.
Yeah.
The Chicago tryout that was planned for fall of 2019 is canceled. We're not doing
and
it,
that's
obviously.
Smart. Because
Yeah,
if your
that's
out-of-town
smart.
tryout fails, you're never going to Broadway. So they actually, like, whatever gymnastics they had to do with their producers and the money aspect of it, like, everybody agreed that we're going to wait, and we're going to, hold the money in trust for a while until we can get this moving at a better moment. And that, I mean, that's a history of all musicals.
Of course.
Are you doing this at the right
working
moment?
the timeline? I mean, we could even, if you want to get conspiratorial about it, you could say that all those delays with the premiere of 42nd Street could be connected to what David Merrick knew about Gower Champion's health.
Exactly.
Right?
And yes.
So the producers have played this game for a long, long time. At any rate, they blame the cancellation. They don't want to, of course, acknowledge that it was Leaving Neverland. Well, I can't speak for them. I can only assume that they did not want to acknowledge Leaving Neverland in 2019. So they blame it on an equity strike, which happens in February of 2019. I think just maybe in Chicago, but it might have been a universal equity strike. But I know it was happening in Chicago. But that strike lasted like 8 days in February, right? And so even equity is like, we have a hard time believing it's our fault when it was 8 days in February and you open in October.
See, this is a show. Michael may not have had a publicist, but this show has a publicist. Has a good one, too. So.
Amen. That's right. So, of course, the show is renamed MJ No More Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. It's renamed MJ the Musical, and it is scheduled for a Broadway premiere. Broadway premiere, by the way, you're right. They decide we're going to skip that out of town and go straight to Broadway because we can't risk the, getting pummeled out of town. And they're going to open summer of 2020. Of course, we all know that didn't happen because COVID. So post-COVID, which we've had that conversation a million times, so we don't need to have it now, but post-COVID, they aimed for a February 2022 opening, and in fact, that did open. But it did require recasting their leading man. Initially, Ephraim Sykes, who was known for his work in Memphis and Motown and Hamilton and Ain't Too Proud, several jukebox musicals plus Hamilton, was brought in to be MJ, but, in the delay after delay after delay of COVID, he had to leave for other opportunities. Left them with 6 months to find a replacement. Again, I don't blame him for that. It's just the timing of, you got a job and you got to take it. I totally understand that. But they found Miles Frost, who would ultimately premiere on Broadway as MJ by a video audition. He's a Maryland native who took the role, and they brought in Rich and Tone Talluega. These are two brothers who danced with Michael Jackson, not for the Dangerous tour, but for the next tour, which I think was History. I'm not positive. but the mid 90s they come in. So after Dangerous, but pre 2003, right? And even to this day, in the time since Michael's birth, I mean, since I'm sorry, Michael's death, they consider, which has almost been, it's a decade and a half removed from Michael's death now, which is unbelievable. But they consider themselves to be the curators of his style. So they were brought on to work with Miles Sprouse to be sure that they had Michael's iconic movement style down pat, and also to ensure that the creative team, Wilden as director, is really, capturing the aesthetic, Michael Jackson aesthetic. They want it to be true and honest. And so Rich and Tone Talladega, the brothers, were brought in to do that. The show opens finally after delay after delay after delay after COVID. It starts previews in December of 2021 at the Neil Simon Theater, and then opens February 1st, 2022. And when it does, if you've seen the show, it is so good. And so as a result, it got mostly favorable reviews. Everybody talked about the production values and how outstanding they were, and how it is just a top of the line production. It definitely meets the very high standard that Michael Jackson had for anything that represented him.
And structurally, as a musical, it does something different, but it holds together. Like, there's so much, like, everybody's just like, I cannot fault this as a work of art.
Right.
The only thing I can say is...
Exactly. And that's exactly what they said. So Jesse Green in the New York Times wrote, "We cannot understand or accept the main character if he's deliberately kept from us." Chris Jones, I love Chris Jones's work. Of all the reviewers that I cite in my books, I think Chris Jones may be the one I cite the most, because he does, I think, really insightful things to say. But he wrote, "The narrative here is entirely the Jackson estate's preferred view of the king of pop, a perfectionist pushed to the brink by a combination of a nasty father, his own shyness, a relentlessly invasive media, and pill-pushing enablers." Naveen Kumar in Variety wrote, "Not so much a biomusical as a high shine and surface skimming rehabilitation tour for its late subject that flattens rather than reckons with his complex legacy." Now, in spite of those things, in essence, what they're saying is they don't talk about the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Everything about this show is fantastic and you got to see it, but know that they don't talk about the elephant in the room. And I get it. I mean, that's why we talked about the elephant in the room, because you got to talk about the elephant in the room when you talk about Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
Even though I would say this is one of my favorite shows. I love it. My children, like I said, I came home from seeing the show. I saw it in Greenville, South Carolina, September of 22 or 23 maybe. I can't remember which. I bought tickets that night to see it 2 weeks later in Charlotte, North Carolina. So immediately saw it again. My children listened to so much Michael Jackson that they dressed up as Michael Jackson, both of them, for Halloween.
I remember, and we talked about that last season.
Right. It deeply impacted my family. My boys and I are going to see it in Knoxville when it comes, I think in January or this coming season at any rate. So I love this show, but I hear this frustration and understand it. And it, I think it's very valid. So those, but at the same time, I appreciate that these reviewers could say, this is the problem with it, but outside of this, it is outstanding. And that's basically what the reviewers had to say about it. The show was nominated for 10 Tony Awards and won 4, Best Actor, Best Choreography, and a couple others. But you have a unique connection to this Tony season.
I do. I have former students in both casts. Lamont Walker, second. I think he plays Marlon. He played Marlon in the original cast of MJ, and he's actually moved on to the Alicia Keys musical now and plays Nuck every once in a while. But MJ the Musical loses the Best Musical to Michael R. Jackson's A Strange Loop. Isn't that funny? It's two Michael Jacksons against one another.
It's crazy.
Two black men showing very, very different experiences of their life in America and what they're dealing with. But the star of A Strange Loop was Jaquel Spivey, who was in my musical theater class in 2018 at Point Park. But I just think it's really interesting. So he loses Jaquel lost to Miles.
Miles. Yeah.
And it's funny because their two lives, they're such different artists, Jaquel and Miles, but they both just had lightning strike moments where, coming out of the pandemic, they both get pulled out of a video audition pool. Like, they sent in their videos and they both get kind of pulled, and all of a sudden they both end up on Broadway. And so, I mean, it's been fun. It's been fun to watch.
That's a very cool
to watch these things happen.
I'm sure. And I think it's so crazy that Michael Jackson, or MJ the musical, loses to A Strange Loop by Michael R. Jackson. I think that's incredible.
And a completely different musical.
Talk about a lightning strike moment. I mean, what are the chances? Yeah. So this show is, it's been running since it opened, previews, like I said, in December of 2021. It's running strong. It's still selling consistently at 90%. It's well over 1,500 performances now. It's playing, to great acclaim at companies all around the world.
And it recouped its investment in 1 year.
Yeah, a $20 million investment, which seems small to me, given, that it's not a small number, but in today's world, it is a small number. And that seems small. When you see the show, it seems small. But good on them. They recouped in just over a year. So it's well worth seeing. It is one of my favorites. I talk about it nonstop when I'm speaking at theater companies. So if you get the chance, go see MJ the musical. But just understand. Theater's complicated. Decisions that we make about what we put in theater is complicated.
And that's really the point of theater when you really, when you sit down and talk about it. The point is to be walking out of that theater talking about how, talking about the play, because we learn about each other and our ideas, and we sharpen our ideas, and we come to an understanding of who we are as, I look at it, who we are as Americans and who we are as people. Yeah. And that's going to tell you a lot about yourself and the people around you. So
yeah, that's exactly what Wildon was saying. It's a conversation starter. And indeed it is. We've had a big, long conversation here today. So it worked, right?
Yep.
That'll do it for this episode of the Dr. Broadway podcast, and for our Turn of the Jukebox Micromester as well. Tune in next time. We'll be talking about The Great Gatsby, which opened on Broadway in 2024 and kicks off our bookish Micromester of musicals that are based on books. Until then, connect with us via email at hello@drbroadway.com